Hello and welcome to another episode of the AI Relay. I am Andrew Signori.
And I'm Jonathan Spanos. And this week I saw a couple of things in the news and it just kind of blew my mind. And I couldn't help but bring it up. And I thought maybe this would be a good episode. But I heard of a couple different companies that just blew past their token budgets at a scale that is just mind blowing. Like numbers, we're talking about, I don't know, an unnamed enterprise, whatever that means, but supposedly spent $500 million in 30 days. That's obviously a mistake, right? That's not like, oh, we're kicking ass. That's like, what the hell? Who left the hose on, right? Or Uber,
Yeah,
actually created a leaderboard for the teams to use the most AI, and they won by spending the most tokens. And it turns out that Uber spent their whole annual budget in 3 months because they told everybody go use this. And my mind got blown not only by the numbers, because the numbers are just hilarious, I think, because they're huge enterprises, so they can go and deal with it themselves. But the point is that on my end, I'm crunching my way through OpenClaw and Hermes, and I'm tweaking every little document on a backdrop of fuel efficiency, essentially, right? Like almost everything that gets tweaked in these open harnesses is always simultaneously how can I be most fuel efficient about this process, about this cycle, about this session handoff, about this session start protocol, whatever it is. Every little tweak saves hundreds and thousands of tokens here and there. How many characters you can reduce it to, coming up with all sorts of techniques of templates and word limits and things, right? So and then I see companies blowing $500 million in 30 days. I'm like, how did you not see that coming? I'm nobody, and I saw it coming. How did you not? Why did
yeah.
enterprise not see
It-
this coming?
I see that, and I think to myself, that's easy, easy, easy,
Easy to blow that money, you mean?
hundred
And I'm saying
percent
blow that
easy to
money
blow the
because this
money.
is
Not
blown
only
money.
is it 100% easy to blow that money, I don't necessarily think, like in the case of Uber, right? I don't even think that that was necessarily a mistake. They probably viewed that program that blew through a year's worth of tokens in a quarter as a success, right? Be, right, because the purpose isn't necessarily fuel efficiency,
No,
right?
the
The
purpose may not
purpose
be,
of
but this
those
can't go
programs,
on without fuel efficiency. What I'm calling fuel token efficiency.
right? Well, so we can I think I might have like a slightly different perspective on 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 fuel efficiency in the enterprise, and why
Hmm.
you're not really seeing it as, at least I'm not seeing it as a priority yet. I think that everybody, like what you're saying is true, right? That eventually, these things matter, in fuel efficiency, using maybe lesser models for lesser tasks, and only using those big foundation models like Opus 4.8, on the most uh,
The highest stakes or the
highest
biggest,
stakes, like the one that requires the
the
highest level of
broadest.
reasoning, you
Right.
know, um,
Sure. There's a place for every model.
where but the right now, I think the focus of the enterprise is very much around adoption, and getting people to adopt AI in their workflows, rather than we want people to use it efficiently, right? Or even approach it with this idea of I should be efficient. I think that
Hmm.
most enterprises right now are just we want our people to start using these tools to make them more productive. And I
and
think
and
that,
they are making them more productive. Just pointing the fire hose of tokens at a thing is making employees more productive at the enterprise level.
yeah, and I don't know that looking at, let's say, token inefficiency is a fair way to be is is it poor value? Even it might be very inefficient use of tokens, but the value that an enterprise achieves from those tokens far outweighs the amount that was spent. And I'll give you an example, right? I work on a team that often a technology team that often uses third party for like for projects, right? We'll have
Hmm.
a very specific thing we need to build. We don't necessarily have that skill set on our team. We'll go out to a vendor, and they'll or a couple of vendors, and they'll bid on a project, and it might cost, let's say, $50,000 and 3 months to build this tool or this dashboard or whatever it is that we need built. Um, now, now that the team has adopted AI, and maybe very inefficiently, we use AI to achieve that thing
Hmm.
that was going to cost us $50,000 in 3 months' time. We're able to do with $1,000 in tokens in a week. So
Yeah.
we've saved God, how much money in man hours in 3 months and in planning and doing this project with this vendor. Now we spent $1,000 in tokens. Now, could we have done it more efficiently? So now we've saved all this time plus $50,000 that we don't have to go to the vendor. So we've saved $49,000 and 2 months and 3 weeks, right?
Right.
Of all of our engineers' time that would have worked on this project. We might have been very inefficient in our token use. And we spent 1,000, and maybe we could have spent 125, or
Hmm.
but who cares? Right? Because we saved $49,000, right? By using tokens inefficiently. Whereas
On that one project, though.
we could have maybe saved 49,750.
On that one project, though. Right now, you have these companies that are like
Dude, listen,
you wouldn't have. As far
the
as
big
I could
thing
tell,
versus
you
the
wouldn't
small thing.
have
Like,
what
that's what I'm just telling you why the enterprise does not care about the 750, because they're
I
saving
know
right now the 49,000
per project, right? But
Yes. So,
if
but
you have these companies, some of these companies have 1,000 projects like a month
so
happening.
they're saving $50,000 on every project.
They wouldn't have been
So
doing
what? That
those
they're like,
projects
they
at
could be saving another
$50,000. They
$700.
wouldn't have
Doesn't
had
matter.
1,000 projects happening if they cost $50,000. They would have done less projects. It would have taken longer, all by its own nature. You just wouldn't have had 1,000 projects happening. So there's a shift in I'm not trying to say that it's all happening wrong, but there's a shift that it
It
sounds like
will come.
enterprise is always
Like,
slow to
it
keep
will
up,
come.
and
It
enterprise
will,
is going to leak a shit ton of token for a
listen,
long
right
time
now there's a
without just
transition.
catching on right now of how to tighten the ship.
Right now there's a transition happening, right? It's transitioning from like, hey, we used to go to like third parties to do it. Now we're going to have like AI agents build this stuff, right? And that transition represents like a massive savings in money. It's also a massive shift in spend, right? So like all of a sudden everybody's looking at like an increased spend in AI. And for sure, right? But what about the decrease in spend in like professional services that we're now replacing with with token spend, right? And it's like, if we increase our token spend by, say, let's call it $5 million, but we reduce our our professional services spend by $80 million, well then like we've saved $75 million. Now, okay, we could be even more efficient in our token use, but no one's going to care if we save like $85,650,000. No one will care. That's a rounding error, right? And like, so this is why there's like a lack of focus in the enterprise, because right now, like, you're an individual that like, if it meant a $50,000 RFP to a vendor, you wouldn't do it. You just simply wouldn't, as an
Exactly.
entrepreneur, you would just
Exactly.
wouldn't do it. An
Exactly.
enterprise, we do it. We
But you
do it.
wouldn't.
We
But you wouldn't do
spend.
1,000 in 30 days. You wouldn't do 1,000 in 30 days.
What do you mean?
If it cost 50,000 each, you wouldn't do 1,000 of them in 30 days. But now
What
you
we do
can
is
do
we could do as
1,000.
many as we could. Now we would just do as many as our employees
Now you
can
can, but
with
exactly.
agents.
So now when you have when you have that much token leakage, to put it in
It's not
some way,
leakage. It's not leakage
like,
when you're transitioning from we were going to spend
and you
this
have it
money with
times
professional services.
1,000, it's an absurd amount of money spent on tokens for no reason at all. If you have
You're missing.
1,000 projects or more going on, and like
No, man.
I'm not missing I'm not missing your point. I'm
We
trying to
don't
say that,
care.
like,
The
it
enterprise
doesn't.
does not care about the rounding error.
That's
They
an honest
yet
take on it. It's not a
because
rounding error, dude. It's ridiculous. It's like full percentages. It's not a rounding error. It's in a massive amounts of token usage for no
right,
reason. And at a time where everyone also is talking about, like,
it is
there's
a rounding error. And
compute
now this is what I
limited,
mean by a
there's
rounding error,
memory
right?
limitations, there's all these limitations to the ability to produce tokens. Everyone's trying to muscle each other out because there isn't this infinite amount of token production. And then you have these huge enterprises that just make me imagine, like, I don't know, like someone carrying like a big barrel of water and just letting it slosh all over the place. Like, I got to get most of this water to the finish line. Like, well, dude, we could think of different ways to do this. And why not start now? You know that the future is going to wind up being like, who is actually the most token efficient at being good at AI? It won't just be good at AI. It'll
Yeah.
be the
Here's
middle layer of we came in, like, who can actually make a balance in this system so that you're getting the most productivity for the least cost. I mean, that's just basic, like, business math,
well,
right? I
listen,
want the most for
this
the
is why
least.
like I'm like literally like pulled up the calculator just to be like, isn't it a rounding error? It is. Uh, if you look at like the cost of a project through like professional services, and let's call it $50,000, right? Like a cost of a 3-month project to build like a reporting dashboard for some very important application. Okay. Uh, and now you can do that in for $1,000 in tokens. Being wasteful, you know what I mean? Like just using Opus 4.8, like just on everything. Okay, and you're now gonna build the dashboard using the best
Yeah, in
model.
like 3
Now
days. In like 3 days.
the dashboard doesn't use AI.
Hmm.
Okay, you're just using it to build it. Okay, and you're gonna spend $1,000 in tokens. All right, so that is 2%. So you have a 98% savings from the cost of your tokens versus the cost of the professional services. Never mind the time, right? Like the fact that one gets done in a week and one would take 3 months, right? But you have a 98% savings now. That's the big win for the enterprise. Okay. Now,
I hear that. Of course I hear that.
what does the savings represent from 1,000 to 250? So now you're all right. Like I'm going to save what is $750 savings represent from the $50,000?
Per project.
We're
You're
thinking
going to do
about the
1,000
50, not the
projects?
$1,000. We're not thinking about like
No, I'm
oh,
talking about
this
per
is
project.
75% of the $1,000. Like we're being wasteful because we could be 75% more efficient.
That's the definition of wasteful.
No, it's actually only 1.5% more efficient to do it that way, right? Because the gain is only $750 against the $50,000. And the
But you
real
have
gain was
that's why I
in
keep
just using
saying,
AI at
I
all.
gotcha. I
Like,
gotcha,
right?
but
And
that's
it's
why I keep
like, so the
times
rounding
that by
error is like
1,000.
in being efficient with tokens is a fucking rounding error compared to what it costs to have ProServe come in and do this. And
Per
that's what the
project.
enterprise is weighing these things against. So it's like, all right, well, it could cost either $250 or $1,000 or $50,000. And they're going to be like, well, A or B is fine. C is no good. right? So it's like A or B, it's like doesn't matter. Like they literally would be like $250 or $1,000, doesn't matter. Like rounding error. Because
That
the scale of
project.
which the scale, but the scale of which that
Look, if you budget, because you've been budgeting for decades, on a certain amount of projects happen per month, and you're outsourcing it, and they cost 50 grand, whatever, and that's your mental model of how things function, and you say, this is how much I pay for SaaS. It's a monthly fee. This is what I get. There's nothing about usage of
I have a
anything. It's
budget.
just
Perfect.
this amount
Perfect
of it
example.
costs, right?
I
But
have a
all of a
budget,
sudden,
right?
hang on. If all of a sudden you flip a switch, and instead of doing that amount of projects per month, whatever it might have been at 50 grand each, right? All of a sudden it's above 1,000 projects a month. That just blows out your budget. And if you
Okay.
didn't watch it, if you didn't see that coming, that's how you become one of these stories, I guess, where you spent $500 million in 30 days. No one's budgeted $500 million for 30 days on tokens. That was a
All right,
mistake
listen,
on someone's part who didn't
the
see something obvious, in my opinion, coming at you. Be token efficient in everything you do. It doesn't make sense to not do that from the get-go, because after 3, 5, and 10 years, you will be the enterprise, whether it's the solopreneur or the enterprise, who is like, I'm a sharp instrument because I've been doing it this way for years already. So everyone else who's trying to figure out why they're bleeding tokens, I could tell you because I've been doing it already.
I mean, listen, like I think that a little bit is like that's the sexy soundbite. But like I said, if somebody spent 4 times too many tokens that they should have to do a project that would have cost 98% more to do, nobody really cares about like whether you spent $250 or $750. And times 1,000 projects, if you saved $49,000 every time, no one cares. That's an incredible return on your money. The fact that you're not getting like, if you're getting 50,000% on your money or whatever, like whatever it is, like 1,000% on your money or 1,000.1% on your money, like I don't care. You know what I mean? It's more effort to do like
It's going to come around at some point. I hear what you're saying. I do. But at some point, it's
right
going to come
now. There's a
around about being
transition.
efficient.
This is what I
And
was
there's no
saying.
reason to be starting to not be already bringing these principles into everyone's stack.
There is. If you want,
I don't understand why there would be no, like, why wouldn't you
because you're
just already start
transitioning
trying
right
to do
now
that?
because you're in a transition period. Right now, you're transitioning from like traditional project work to like AI agents doing project work. And the savings that enterprises achieve from that transition is so massive. Now, there's going to be a time when like it has transitioned from professional services now to like agents doing the work that professional services were doing. All right. And like once it's transitioned, that's when you look at like token efficiency. Right. But right now, like the big win, the huge win is like any sort of tokens doing those jobs rather than like let's sweat over like the token efficiency or it doesn't really matter if it is actually replacing like this big ticket item. It will have like after the transition happens and like everything is being done by agents. Yeah. Then you should go back and be like, is it efficient? But like AI versus professional services, which is more efficient? Even the most inefficient use of tokens is thousands of times more efficient than the way we're doing it now. So like token efficiency isn't really like, we're not thinking about it too much because we're like, even being sloppy, we're saving like massive amounts of money by using AI. So the story doesn't always get it right. And like, we might not be estimating adoption correctly. That's what it tells me when like a company blows through.
That's where I
Like
wanted to kind of bring this, indeed.
You're not estimating adoption correctly. Now, that being said, there was a story of a developer that was looking at, he was building this thing and it was huge, like it was against a huge data set. And the way that he was going to be analyzing the data was super inefficient for this app. And it was a massive data set. And he calculated if he ran it the way he built it, what it would cost. And it was like $2 million. It was a massive amount of money, right? And he realized that like, oh, I'm doing it in like a ridiculous way. If I like put it into this data lake and I vectorize the data lake and I, index it and I do my searches against and I query the index rather than like pulling all this like into context, it'll be,
These are
it's
there you go,
pennies.
though. It's of course, it's pennies,
Okay.
and these are the
So like,
principles that are, like,
yes,
already out there. People,
that can happen and those mistakes
we're
can happen.
already implementing these things.
But the flip side of that is like when you're looking at like, I'm going to spend $1,000 to replace $50,000.
Yes,
And you're
I
saying, well,
see,
you
I
should
see,
have spent
well,
$300. Like
I'll
I
yield on
already
your
saved
math right now.
$49,000.
I'll yield on your math, but one more thing I wanna say there, though, is that does that not sort of, reveal the kind of illiteracy of the enterprise level of how this technology actually works? That they just have so much money that then when they see that amount of savings, they're like, "It's okay, we can blow a bunch of money because we save so much money." And it over time, like, how are they gonna actually know how it
I
works
think,
until someone comes to tell them like, "Yo, man, you
no,
leak
but it starts
unbelievably. Like, we need to tighten up your shit because it's unbelievably
more
leaky."
so that I think that like at a high level, like at a senior management level, there's a recognition that like our employees need to start using AI. They need to adopt it in their workflows, right? And there's a push to be like, hey,
There's
everybody, like now
that's
senior
the leak.
management doesn't necessarily even know in how in your domain you should be doing that, right? Like the
Right.
CEO of a company doesn't know how like
I would
somebody
say
that's in
even
like
more
digital
so,
marketing
I
should
would
be
wanna
implementing.
ask, like, do you think your managers even know really how token efficiency, could be implemented? Does it even mean anything to the
And
managerial
this
level
is
and
why
up?
I'm saying like it doesn't matter in an enterprise. To the senior manager that doesn't really have a concept of token efficiency, but he does have an idea of like, hey, we budgeted $50,000 for this project and we just achieved it for 1,000. That he understands, right? So like if you tell him like, dude, you were so inefficient with your tokens, he's going to give you the double bird and be like, I saved $49,000. You telling me I was
So
inefficient?
so
I
you wanna
saved
say, like,
$49,000.
it's possible that
Suck
it's
it.
possible, in other words, through the lens you're painting that you're showing, that Uber burnt through that annual budget in 3 months because they just
They're
finished
high
all their
fiving.
projects. They just finished their projects. They were like, "Yo, we did a whole year's worth of projects." Is that what happened in Uber?
I think that in some cases that happened. In some cases, listen, there is going to be waste. There's going to be
I
enterprises are like a giant barge. Okay, like they don't change quickly. Bureaucracy exists in enterprises for the same reason they exist in like European countries. It's to like slow things down, right? It is to have like, like consensus and that so people like that individuals can't make decisions that have an effect on thousands of shareholders, and and in some cases, like, all of our customers, right? So like a bureaucracy sort of exists in the enterprise for a reason. But like when it comes to like spending money, your team has a budget in order to achieve their goals for the year. And they might have blown through their budget. But like these stories aren't capturing, they're just capturing the fact that they blew through their budget. They're not capturing what was achieved with the use of AI, right? And like and like what wasn't farmed out to professional services this year And like, so you might see in another thing that like, oh, like we spent $20 million this year, less on professional services, right? But maybe you budgeted 5 million for AI and you blew it out and you spent 10 million, but you still saved net 10 million because you didn't spend the 20 million on professional services, right? The sexy story around AI is that like, oh, they blew through their budget, but they don't talk about like, well, what did you do with them? Like what was achieved? Like you saved, you not, and not every project that you farm out to professional services and you spend sometimes half a million, $1 million on, it doesn't always achieve the thing you wanted to achieve. You spent the money, they walk away from the project and it's like, yeah, they'll tell you that they did it, but the outcome isn't, you don't achieve the outcome. They might have built the thing or like gave you the report or whatever, but the outcome of that isn't what you hoped for. Right. So like, uh, these aren't captured in the reports that say like, oh, we blew through our budget. We blew through our AI budget. Like you might have blown through it, like, and it still might have been good value. It still might have been good value because like now your employees are using AI. And
Yeah, I
just
mean,
the challenge
and
of adoption.
that's the point that I kind of want to pause on for a minute, because that's a good point. And is people using AI at this point is probably really the top priority. Like, just everybody just use it so that you get to know it. But I guess in my progression, I'm discovering that like hand in hand of being a good AI practitioner is understanding the concept of fuel efficiency and how you can do everything normally, but do it in a token efficient way. That's like weaving that into the practitioner's
I hear
methods
you.
is
But
important. And if the enterprise is paying all these people to have jobs and do what you're doing and building all this stuff, and you're going to wind up with are we going to wind up with a layer of like, just, I don't know,
you are
blurry
already
AI practitioners?
you are already a practitioner, right? You started as like a practitioner. The enterprise is filled with people that are not, that are still doing things in a very traditional way, right? And the
And
migration
burning a shit
from
ton of
like,
tokens doing it.
but yeah, but the migration from like doing things in a traditional way to using AI in an inefficient way still represents a massive value to doing it in the traditional way,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So like an AI enabled employee, even using AI in in a token inefficient way, is still like 10 times more productive than an employee that's not using AI at all. And that is, so like you're going like, oh, I'm comparing AI, like inefficient use of AI to efficient use of AI. And of course it makes more sense to like approach it from the sense of like just out of the gate use it efficiently, right?
Seems to
But
me.
like we're like the enterprise is just really at this point concerned with the transition of traditional to AI. Not even like, even though they will happily take inefficient use of AI because everybody else is not using AI. You're already using AI and you're like,
So
I'm using AI and I'm paying for it myself. So like I should be using this the most efficient way.
exactly.
You have a whole bunch of people that aren't, they have free AI at their fingertips and aren't using AI.
But do they? So this brings me to another point that I've wanted to ask you, because you're on the enterprise side. I have no idea. It's like a black curtain. But
Okay.
what, another thing that I thought of when I read these stories was, why are we hearing about this now? These big companies, according to yourself, right? You've been using AI at some capacity for going on 2 years, maybe more. Why all of a sudden am I reading stories about the token usage of these enterprise? What was going, when did something change, and how were you just using tokens for free
So
until
this is an
now?
excellent this is an excellent question. right? So I'm super lucky, sort of in a position of privilege in that like I work in the cloud space as like in in the cloud engineering team and in the cloud like on the these cloud platforms like AWS and Microsoft Azure, these are where the models are hosted. So
Like
what
literally, when I go on cloud, cloud.ai web app and I ask it a question,
right,
the
well, yes.
the model that is actually pinging back and doing the token calculations is sitting in an AWS server somewhere.
Well, yes, but for at least for I can only speak for I'll speak for my enterprise, right? That is like we do not use public infrastructure for or like publicly hosted AI models, right? We don't use like OpenAI or Claude.ai. We will use OpenAI models that are hosted on our own, like for OpenAI, for example, like we'll host our own private OpenAI models in Microsoft Azure just for us, just for our
Hmm.
data. It's just ours. It's not OpenAI. They don't get to see anything. Like we're hosting it on in our accounts and it's just for us.
It's
And
your
in
own private
Amazon,
room with your own
private
private model.
room, it's just ours. Okay. And
Hmm.
Amazon, they have a service called Bedrock, and Bedrock is where you can get like Claude, privately hosted, just yours. It's just yours. Now you're paying tokens to AWS or Azure,
Right.
right, for the use of these things, and AWS is sharing that revenue with you know OpenAI
Or
or
Anthropic
Anthropic
or
for
whatever,
sure.
and whatever that deal
Uh,
is, sure. But
right, but like
it's at whatever rate it's at,
right,
right?
we have our own privately hosted Claude model and Azure models, right? So I was in a position, like sort of a privileged spot where, you know, we could host it in a lab and like we could kick the tires on stuff and I could figure out, how to use it. So like early on, uh, I was responsible for like, I had an interest in it and I was responsible for like, all right, like figure out how we're going to host this for the enterprise. And there was another team that was responsible for how are we going to implement AI in our company, right? That wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was like, all right, like host the model, make sure how is the model going to be available?
Hmm.
These other people were going to worry about like, now
What to do with it?
who gets access to it, right?
Right.
How are we going to give the company access to it? That wasn't my team. But because we're the cloud team, and we have access to this model, like we have a lab and we need to figure out how to host it and like how to do all these things. Like, well, we had access to it. Like so I had early unfettered access to like a chat GPT like thing or like a model that I could use to build my own stuff or, just use AI and just experiment with it and, figure out so I was pretty lucky in that like I had access to these like they actually called it like the playground. And you
Yeah,
could
right.
build agents and like, you could build little chatbots and
Little
and have
GPTs.
like RAG, you learn about RAG and like you could really easily create a chatbot with like a RAG, a RAG of
Mm.
like, documents, and
Hmm.
have a chatbot now that like use this document repo as a knowledge base.
Right.
And then so I was
Early
super
days.
right. And our company decided early that like, all right, we're gonna like
So
we'll build
hang on
our
one second. Hang on one second,
yeah.
because this is an interesting moment right there. So this is, let's say, probably a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Those were tokens. You were burning tokens then, right? But why were
Yeah.
we not token? Why were we not talking about tokens in 2022, 2023, 2024? Like, why is token usage only something that's coming out of the woodworks now
All
over
right.
the
And this
last,
is
let's say,
about
6 months? And it might
so
be because OpenClaw might have pulled back the curtain
nah,
and been
no,
like,
no, no,
"Yo."
no, no, nothing to there's nothing to do with OpenClaw. I'll tell you, it has to do with like just like the maturity of the enterprise, right? So in the very beginning, we didn't like enterprises weren't sure how they were going to implement AI, right? And early implementations of AI, obvious implementations of AI were chatbots, right? So the company, there was concern that like, hey, if we just give everybody access to like spin up their own open AI models in Azure whenever they want to, like we're gonna have a million models out there. They're gonna be spending tons of money. We're gonna have no idea who's spending money on what. Like, we don't want to do that. So, and especially
Right.
like in the beginning, you know,
But what were they spending money on in the beginning? Was it more like a SaaS contract where it was like, give me this much money, you have a seat, you can use this model and do what you will with it? Like more like software would have been, or was from the beginning, was it really kind of like an electrical meter where you're paying per usage
electrical meter. It
from the
was
very beginning?
from the very beginning. It was electrical meter. It was
So the
like you're gonna pay.
enterprises are not these stories sound like the enterprises, are caught with their pants down paying for SaaS when they've been paying for an electric bill the whole time.
It's
But
not SaaS, dude. It's not SaaS at all, right? It's not like we're not talking about SaaS usage. This is about API usage, right?
right.
It's about like we're hosting a model, and we're gonna and API like privately hosted enterprise API usage is more expensive than publicly hosted API usage from Claude, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're buying the API tokens from Claude, it's just Claude. You're buying it directly from Claude. We're buying it from
Mm-hmm.
Amazon.
You got a middleman,
So you can be sure that
right?
Claude, like Anthropic, is getting the same dollar amount per token.
Right.
We're
And
getting
then
upcharged
AWS is
from
tacking on a
AWS.
percent on top of it.
They're hosting it, and we're like privately, and they're not sharing the data with Anthropic and stuff. That's all at a premium. So
Mm-hmm.
enterprises are paying that premium to have like, because they don't want to share their data with Anthropic. This way, it's like we can be sure that like if I can put like whatever
Sure.
spreadsheet of proprietary data and
Sure.
stick it on an agent and like, and not worry about that it's being shared
But so
publicly.
they've been, the spend has been on API, so tokens since the very beginning. So
Right. Yes. But think
is it
about,
something where suddenly it just took off and all of a sudden, like
yes.
we went from, we
Yeah.
went from using,
Here's how it happened.
250,000 tokens a session to billions of tokens a day.
Yes. This is how it happens, right? Is that like the first availability of AI within the enterprise became an enterprise chatbot. That was like, hey, everybody, we have AI now. Go over here. It's chatbot. And you can even have like RAG, a little cute little RAG stuff. You can like put in your
Sure.
documents, chat
I'm
against
talking
it.
to delta.com. Its RAG knows about, bookings, and it
No,
knows
we're
about
talking internal. We're
reservations
talking
and
like
whatever. You're talking
you're
even
a
more
sales
scoped.
team. You're a sales team and you've got a whole bunch of sales like marketing information. You stick it into you upload it into our corporate AI chatbot, and now you can chat against it and ask it questions and
Internals. Interesting. Yeah. So this was
internal,
all in
like
the beginning. It
it's
was
like
all
an
just internal stuff.
internal chat GPT. Think of it like that, right? It's like
Yeah.
we created our own internal chat GPT. That was like the first implementation and the first availability to use AI at least my company was like this chatbot that was available to everybody. It was like, hey, everybody, we have AI now. Okay. That's how it started. And then like there are more sophisticated users that realize like, hey, I don't want a chatbot. Like I want access to a large language model. Like I'm going to build my own thing, and it's not a chatbot, right? It's something else. So then we created like what is an API layer where we like the company created an API where we'd hand out keys to API keys. We'd issue API keys to people, and
To
behind that
employees, to people in the
API,
company. You'd
yeah,
hand out
and
API keys
behind that
to people in the
API
company.
was models, and that way, like we only had to host like let's say 6 models, right? And thousands of people could have keys to it, as opposed to
Mm.
thousands of people like spinning up their own models, right? So now we can control everything through like an API layer where it's like, all right, now we could like see who's using what, charge per token. We only have to manage these 6 large language models rather than all these thousands of people needing their own, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so that was the next. So that once we started doing that, that's when it starts to explode. Once, and that was for
That's when
application.
token usage starts to explode. That's when token usage starts to explode.
Yeah, but like once they started issuing API keys for like for people who were like developers that were building applications that needed AI, right?
Hmm.
Then those same developers started using those same keys for like Claude Code, right? So then we're like, all right, people are using it for Claude Code. Like, we really should issue keys for Claude Code. So then the floodgates opened, right? And like all of a sudden, people are like, all right, I can use Claude Code now. Like, I'll take a key, right? That was
With the
me.
mentality of unlimited, I could just unlimited use Claude Code
Like,
now, right? That
now I
was the
can use Claude Code at
but
work.
API
And
tokens are just going cling, 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 cling,
now
cling.
up until this moment, I'm using AI in my personal life as a just a nerd. Like, I love this stuff, and like I was learning, I'm using it as a, but not so much at work. But like the day I found out I could use Claude Code at work, game changer, game changer. All of a sudden, I became the most valuable employee on my team. Because like I knew how to use it, and
Already.
like already,
That's the
and
same kind of concept that I'm trying to say about token efficiency.
now,
Why not be getting into it now so that these enterprises can say, we're already there? Anyway, I
now,
digress, but
but
back to
I've
the
just
beginning.
explained to you like a progression of like chatbot to like APIs for applications that need to use AI to API keys for individuals using AI. And like, I got mine. I started producing stuff. People on my team were like, how are you doing that? From my key, we generated 6 keys, because or 7 keys, because everybody on the team then were like, I need to have that now. Show me what you're doing. So you're like, all right, well, like, how does it go from like, now this is over the course of a year and a half, right? So like, if you think about when the budget was budgeted,
Hmm.
what was even the concept of AI
Right.
at our enterprise? It was still the chatbot,
Chatbots.
right? Right. It was still that chatbot that I described in the beginning. Like, hey guys, we have AI. It's this chatbot over here with, rack. So when you're like, how do they blow through the budget? Well, when they made the budget fucking a year and a half ago,
Right.
that's when the
Exactly.
budget's created a year and a half ago. The concept of AI was a
Hmm.
chatbot with maybe a cute little rag on it, right?
Right.
Now the
You,
concept of AI is like everybody has an API key managing a coding harness, like
yeah.
that's how it fucking happens, right? It's
It
like
it smacked
when
them
they
in the
created
face.
the
It smacked
budget,
everybody in the face. It smacked
but
even
even the
Anthropic
idea
and
of like
OpenAI in the face because
the
they were
idea of like
like
what the fuck,
scrambling for compute.
what AI is, and like what we'll be using API tokens or AI tokens for when that budget was created compared to now, it's sort of like, you couldn't even imagine that this is how we'd be using AI now
But
that we've blown through the budget.
now they can. Now they see how API
But the budget will
is
be adjusted.
used and cost, and the budget will be adjusted. And this is because it's such early days for everything. I mean, we're still only months into some of this stuff, really.
But
Even
like
at the
sort of like
enterprise
to answer the
level,
question of how did that happen? That's how it happens, right?
it
It's like
happened
you cannot foresee
because
even people
you
using
cannot foresee.
coding agents when the budget
Because you
was
could
created.
right, you couldn't possibly foresee it. I mean, this is only about, I don't know, that kind of usage
Well,
of
it looks
Claude
like
Code
what are we
really is
talking
from
about?
like the fall, like November or
A,
something,
a year and a
where people
half.
started talking about, that using Claude Code not only for coding. Is that even
Right.
a year ago?
There's
I don't
like
even think that's even a
no
year ago.
way an enterprise would be able to forecast effectively how their employees would be using AI in 18 months. So it is no surprise at all that all the budgets aren't even close.
Or just
And that
blown
is
out.
not to say that, like, the token usage hasn't provided massive value, because that's not what these reports are saying. They're just saying that the budget was blown,
Right.
right? And that's only because, like, who knew that, like, people in, like, an accounting team would want API tokens for a coding agent, but they do.
I guess we'll have to see, like, you know, over the next year or two, what kind of companies decide to budget for this kind of token usage, and what kind of companies say, no, we're not going to be spending that money on that kind of token usage. And those are just business decisions, you know, based on those particular enterprises or whatever entities,
Yeah.
because it's a state of change. Everything is a state of change right now, whether you're down here at my level, just messing around with Hermes agents and like JSON configurations,
You don't
or
understand
if
how
you're up at the
free
enterprise level.
you are, like, you're truly free. Like, we have shackles in the enterprise. You know, like, we have, you know, so many nervous people in the enterprise, that, like, that hold it back, where
Mm,
your whole productivity stack as an individual entrepreneur can mature at the same pace. And that's very difficult to happen, like, in the enterprise where, like,
right.
there are all these silos. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's one particular silo that's gone in, like, fast forward, and all the other ones are, like, looking around going, like, you know, and and no one feels bad about it because no one else is moving fast. So they're just like, it's totally normal to be like, "Yeah, like,
For
AI
now,
has
man, for
totally
now.
lapped us and we are, like, obsolete, but, like, we don't know what to do about it, so we're just gonna keep doing it. Let's keep holding
Oh
this
my
meeting
god.
forever." You know? I'm being
Oh,
cynical, but
it's
that's
probably an ancient no, it's probably an ancient story of human nature to just kind of
it is, but
deer in headlights almost like, I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna stand here and
keep
wait for
having the
the
meeting.
inevitability to come.
Let's just keep
And,
let's just keep having
you
this
know,
review board, you know, and,
yeah,
like,
like,
right, like, once a week, you
I
know?
don't need to be the agent of change. Change is coming. Like, I'll
Well, it's
just
like a
get
weird thing.
swept up with it and deal with drowning when it happens.
It's like a weird thing when, like, it used to be, you know, like, you'd build an application and it would take, like, let's call it 3 months, okay? And that would, like, you'd start on day 1, it would finish on day, you know, 90, alright? And then there'd be a process where, like, you'd have to, like, go and, like, review the architecture for the app. And you might also start that on day 1, and that might take till day 45. The whole review process of, like, we're gonna meet, we're gonna review, we're gonna have some changes for you. You're gonna present the evidence that the changes were made, and you'll be approved. Day
Mm,
45, it's like, that's fine. We won't be done until day 90.
mm,
You know, like, we're not even
yeah,
done writing the app yet. So no problem that, like, this has taken 45 days because we're gonna take 90 days to do it.
right.
Well, all of a sudden, the development process goes from 90 days to 5 days, right? But the review process is still taking 45 days.
Mhm, mhm.
This is the like, the problem isn't the use of tokens. This is the real this is the real problem at the enterprise, is that, like,
Well,
all of a sudden you have this thing that went from the longest pole in the tent to the shortest. And and it happened overnight, and that nothing else is maturing nearly as fast. So you have all these other dumb processes that were perfectly fine being dumb process when this was a dumber,
mhm.
like, a slower process. But now, like, you know, this review process should be, like, also an agent, you know, like, this review board
I think that
needs
those
to
both of those, examples could be bundled with probably a whole bunch of other ones as well that I can't think of right now, but into a kind of AI literacy. And when I'm kind of one of the I guess part of what almost
right,
shocked
but
me
so
with
you can
those
see the
numbers
advantage
was
of saying, like, the advantage is going from the 45-day review board to using AI to do it. and not from being like using haiku versus
I
something.
see it all as the same
The real
conversation
advantage
at
is
different
like
levels, though.
the
I see
real
it at the same
advantage is
conversation.
like in the 1 week process down to 30-second review by an AI agent. And
I
that's
see that.
like, and like the fact that we're not using the most efficient agent
I see them as the same,
only
as
matters when
ultimately
like we're
bundled.
not transitioning from that thing.
It's bundled. Because you're just, the whole thing is that you're continuously compressing it to be more and more efficient. Because going from 90 days to 45
Now,
days, 45 days to 5 days, that's a level of compressing efficiency. It continues though, and the future will be built on a layer of I think humans who know how to design
like,
efficiency into the substrate so that the productivity levels are
yes.
kicking ass at super fuel efficient levels.
Dude, you're right. You're 100% right. If you're approaching something like starting from scratch, you are 100% right. If your approach is like, I'm
Why?
going from,
Why can't you come in and insert that in the enterprise level as a layer that, like, here are the people that need to do stuff. We're going to guide you how those tokens get used, and their productivity is going to be the same outputs. You're just going to have like a more fuel efficient car. Why can't you come and be
because
like, I'm
they,
going to make
because
your car more fuel
again,
efficient?
because you're talking about the difference between 98 and 98.1 efficiency. And like, no one gives a shit about that 0.1%.
At some
Because
point, I
I'm
believe
going
someone will
from
give a shit.
spending $100,000 to spending $2,000. And you're saying, well, yeah, but you could spend $1,900.
When you're no longer
What
going
the fuck? Who
from
cares?
having spent that much money, when the phase has come
Yes.
where,
Starting from scratch, it's like makes
no, not even
that
starting from
is
scratch. Like when the enterprise has forgotten that it used to spend $50,000 per
yes.
tool.
Well, after the transition, go back and optimize. But right now, the optimization is going from $50,000 to 2,000 versus like $50,000 to 1,200. Like
Yes, that is happening.
that's the rounding error. Like,
Where and what I'm bringing up without any answer to the question,
but
but
you're
like,
talking about
if
like
you don't
the
start
added
with AI
complexity of having
literacy,
to wrap your head around like
I'm calling it AI
being
literacy.
efficient.
I'm calling it AI
Yeah.
literacy though. So
Yeah. But dude, you're
is
asking a whole lot.
enterprise going to produce a whole fleet of humans who are AI medium literate, who
Dude,
are
you're lucky
spending the
to get
majority of the
people.
tokens, you know?
Dude, you're giving far too much credit, right? Most people are like your mom, right? They've like gone on ChatGPT a couple of times, right? Like we have
Well, but these
in my
people,
company, we have like 36,000 people, let's call it, right? And I'm gonna say there are 1,000 people that are using AI in any sort of efficient way.
at work.
Yeah. Those 1,000 people are kicking ass and
So
using all the tokens.
The Ubers and the swipes that are like on the cutting edge of using all these AI concepts and
They
tools.
might have
Do you, th-
2,000 of their, you know what I mean?
do you think they're a minority of the major, giant companies? Do you think most
Well,
of the
no, I
giant
think Uber
companies?
is like I don't work for a technology company. So like most of the people that work in my company are like scientists and like salespeople. They're not technologists, like Uber, you have mostly developers and shit. So you probably
Good
have people that
distinction.
are more likely to adopt like advanced technology
Right.
than,
But so if we're talking
like
about insurance or
Kevin.
pharmaceuticals or like major law firms or like whatever giant other companies I can think of,
Dude,
petrol companies, they're going to be
one thing,
slow on the uptake, and they're going to wind up being the most inefficient companies probably forever,
dude,
is my point, because
one
they're never going to get it. They're never going to get it. They're always going to be behind the eight ball on like fuel efficiency at some point.
I'm gonna wrap it up with this though. Is like one thing is for sure, nobody thinks AI can do their job, right? Everybody uses AI to do somebody else's job. Like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lawyer would never use AI for like for and think it could provide good legal advice. But a lawyer will let it do SEO for its website for sure. Like it would be
Right.
like, oh yeah, I could but like somebody who does SEO for a living They would never allow AI to do the SEO, but they'll have AI write a contract for them. Definitely write a contract for them.
Yeah, right. Right.
Everybody thinks, but the truth is AI can do the job of everybody,
If
obviously,
it's
right?
if
Because like
it's
that contract that the SEO guy got was good enough, right?
can't do it by
The
itself. It still can't do it by itself. We can start trying to wrap it up there because you're
All
right.
right,
The
well,
models can
let's
do a
call it.
lot of things, but without humans, the models are just wild fire hoses of tokens that have no idea why they're doing it unless a human told them why they're doing it.
This is very true. But the transition of going from not using AI to using AI, even inefficiently, that productivity gain is so massive that it outweighs stressing about token efficiency. Like when you're talking about like, if you're going from like, but if you're going from I'm spending $1 million to I'm going to spend $50,000 or $49,000, like I just go to the $50,000. Like don't even worry about the 49. If it's even 1% more complicated to get to 49, don't worry about it. Just
Hmm.
save me the big chunk. That's the big gain. Once everything has been saved, then you can go back and be like, all right, well, that's just how we now operate. We can now, by being efficient, save 40% on our token use by like offloading this to like, lesser
Right.
agents.
Significant amounts of token use
Sure.
could be saved
Yeah.
with simple techniques. With
Well,
simple
but
techniques, you don't have to be
but
that crazy
that
about it,
is that it takes effort, and it's a matter of like the juice being worth the squeeze. And it's like when you're talking about, is it worth the 1% more to now have to offload to like not just get people to like start using AI, but like offload to sub agents with like lower,
Mhm.
lesser
Mhm.
models
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
appropriately?
I think it's
Forget it.
maybe it's just surfacing and sort of almost literally drawing the learning curve. The enterprise, like the
I,
enterprise token burn almost draws the learning curve of all of us of AI literacy. Like it's so sloppy right now, basically because so many people are probably, or I guess a minority of people, you're saying like, let's say 1,000 out of 3,600 people or whatever. Is that what you said? 36 or 36,000? Um,
1,000.
right. So, the learning curve is it's still flat, actually, probably. We haven't even begun to go up the on a grand scale, on a collective scale. People are still getting past the better search engine and little chatbot concept, I suppose. And
Yeah. I mean,
we might be so steeped in it that I'm like, oh, what that you
you
should
are in
reduce
a
that
bubble, man.
document, by 10% because it's going to
I
burn
work
that
in
many more
technology,
tokens.
and like many, many people that work, look, careers in technology have not in any significant way adopted AI in their day to day. They
It's
can't
funny.
believe it when they see it. They're like, "Well, wow, it knew that. How did it know that?" I'm like, "Dude, it knows everything."
Yeah, right.
Like they don't even
Or
know that it knows everything.
And now it's
Uh,
almost like, whoa, it just did that, right? I've done some
yeah,
things where people are like, whoa, that just did that by itself. Like, yeah, man, it's in your folder. Open it. Look, it's
right.
amazing. It's a good
All right, man.
time to,
We'll call it.
it's a good time. It's a good time to be calling it. It's a good time to be in this, coming at it
Oh
from so
man,
many different depths and
best
angles
time. Like
and
this is
seeing it.
like, we're like the advent of the greatest, we're the invention of electricity type shit.
Yeah.
This
And
is in
it's been unleashed
yeah,
on all of us and everyone's coming up with different solutions to a lot of the same problems. And that's for me, that's one of the most interesting things to see how many people out there are working on the same things. And some of us are coming up with similar, but not quite the same ideas. And then I look at the enterprise, I'm like, there's just like a blind dinosaur walking and stomping on things. Like, why doesn't it know? But it's been an edifying conversation, as always, from the enterprise level, as I'm
yeah,
just a
it's
little
not quite as
crustacean looking
blind. Like I was
inside,
saying, like it's not quite as blind. Like like we'll wrap it up. But I was like, I was saying before that like there's that MIT study that is cited all the time about enterprises that like 90% of AI projects they're not fruit they weren't fruitful, they didn't they didn't provide value, right? That they
Mhm.
versus what they spent.
Mhm.
But like that, I think that report came out in like late 2024, and you figure like it took some time to collect the data, and when you look at then the period that they're looking at like, you know what, the first and second, you know, maybe at the first half of 2024, AI adoption, the first half of 2024, and that like it was like the, the technology was a baby.
Yeah.
Even like the reports that reflect what is happening right now in the enterprise, you like those won't be written for 3 more months, and those will be spoken about for another year, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, you know,
And the rate of change in the
it's
3 months
so
it
fast.
takes to write the article is way stale. So I
Well,
take
I
your
can
point
tell
on
you
that for
3
sure,
months
but
ago,
it's
if all right, let's say 6 months ago, I was the only person using on my team using AI in a significant way. 3 months ago, maybe one other. Now, all 8 members of the team are using it in a significant way to improve their productivity. So like that's how AI usage ends up blowing out
Mhm.
budgets, right? This is,
Mhm.
you know, this is how it happens. And I don't think it's a bad thing, and I don't think Uber is going to look at that and be disappointed, right? Because like this means that like there's adoption within their company. No one likes to blow away a budget, but like again, like I said before, like what about all the stuff they didn't spend that money on, right?
Mhm.
You're not seeing where like, well, they were under budget in professional services this year by, you know, maybe
Mhm.
100
Mhm.
million, right? So they
Mhm.
like, you know, they
Mhm.
spend 50 million more or whatever it was. Anyway,
Yeah.
we're at an
No,
hour.
that's
Let's call it.
yeah, we we dug in deep though. It was a good one because it did strike me as just crazy. So it's good to get the inside perspective. There is always a balance and at least 3 sides to every story, I suppose.
Inside baseball.
Indeed, indeed. So like, share, subscribe. Of course, we waited for an hour again for me to tell everybody that we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
It's
But
a
if you made it
secret,
this far, yeah, it's the Easter egg if you're
just in
like
case.
suddenly suggested.
All right, dude.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for anyone who's made it this far. You're probably not even there. Thanks a lot.
Later.
See you.